A law targeting distracted driving in South Carolina went into effect on Labor Day. Today, I talk one-on-one with State Representative Spencer Wetmore of House District 115 for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. State Representative and Attorney Spencer Wetmore, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you, Quintin. Always a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I appreciate it greatly. Needless to say, as I just mentioned, you are an attorney and a state representative for the state of South Carolina, representing House District 115. And of course, as you know, a law targeting distracting driving went into effect on Monday here in South Carolina, according to WCNC in Charlotte. H327, which is known as the South Carolina Hands-Free Act, bans the use of mobile devices while operating a vehicle on South Carolina roads. The bill was signed by Governor McMaster, as you know, on May 12th and went into effect just yesterday. But let me back it up, State Representative. Why this law? Why now?
Well, as you know, and you probably see just as much as anyone, drivers are more distracted than ever these days. You constantly see people on their phones and, not just kids, it's adults, it's everyone. I mean, listen, I think we're all probably guilty of it at some point. So none of this is meant to be some sort of, wag of the finger. I mean, cell phones have become a really pervasive part of our lives. And unfortunately, the state, we know from safety that unfortunately our roads are not getting safer and we're having more and more accidents. So there was a really compelling need to take action to make sure that our drivers are staying focused on the road.
I have to pivot just a second, State Representative, but do we know how many fatalities have actually been associated with distracted driving in South Carolina?
I don't know the number off the top of my head, but unfortunately I know that our road safety conditions have not improved over the years, despite efforts that we've made in other areas, improvements to DUI laws, congestion and safety audits of our physical roadways. Unfortunately, we're still seeing just as many accidents per capita. And so, I think this is one of many things we can do to improve the safety of our roadways.
Another pivot. Is a lot of these accidents associated with distracted driving? Is that associated with pre-COVID or just more people moving to South Carolina?
Well, the numbers that I'm aware of from when we debated this in the legislature were per capita numbers. So I think that accounts for more people on the roads after, both because of coming back from COVID and because of people moving here. So I don't know sort of which came first, chicken or the egg, but I do know that per capita, we're still seeing a similar number of accidents as we were seeing previous to both of those things.
Wow, I want to get back to that in just a second, but I want to continue with the article because South Carolina drivers will now be prohibited from holding a mobile device, reading or writing text messages, and watching videos. The law applies to moving vehicles, but does not impact parked vehicles. Silly question. What about those dark tent windows?
Well, listen, that's going to be an issue, I think, for enforcement. Now, as you probably know, we already have a legal limit on where a window can be tinted to. A civilian windows can be tinted. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but I know that the tint level is supposed to be sufficient for other drivers to see hand motion and things like that, right? So in other words, you should be able to see if a driver's telling you to come on or, make sure that they're making eye contact with you before you cross the street as a pedestrian. And so, but the law does say that the officer must have a clear and unobstructed view of the driver using an electronic device before a stop can be initiated. So we do have to be, clear about that you may see some enforcement also of our existing tinted window laws.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that as far as tweaking that. And of course, I don't drive. I don't know how to drive, so I'm riding a bicycle every day here. And I saw a lot of people texting and driving earlier today here on the streets of the peninsula. Yeah. But can a device actually sit in your lap while driving?
No, it cannot even be supported by any part of your body. This was a big debate we actually had at the State House. People wonder what we do in Columbia all day and debating whether or not supported by your body. And so no, it really can't be. The idea here is that if the device is connected to, say, Apple CarPlay or your Bluetooth, you can use that to both make a voice call. So unfortunately, people started getting a lot more phone calls from me instead of text messages. That old, this phone call could have been a text message. Well, unfortunately, we're back to phone calls now. But so you can make a voice call, Or if you can hit a button on your Bluetooth and, initiate text Quintin, da 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 da, you can do that as long as you don't touch the phone while you're doing it. If you can do it through a voice command, then it's okay. But the idea is that other than what you can do through a voice command, the phone should be put away. It should not be in your lap. It shouldn't be in your hands, because we know how tempting that is, right? Just having your phone on your desk while you're working can make it impossible to focus. And I think we want to make sure that the phones are out of sight, away, out of mind while people are driving.
When they do hit that Bluetooth button, can it be just one time only?
So anytime that you can initiate it, so the way that it reads, and I'm going to read from the bill here, it does not prohibit the use of an earpiece or a wrist to conduct voice communication, and it also does not prohibit initiating a voice-based communication. So I think if you had to hit one button to initiate a voice communication, I think the way I read it, that would be fine.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And going back to my earlier days in television news as an intern at Channel 5, we always, went to, breaking news. They call it spot news. So, and you see car accidents, this place, that place. And most of the times you can record from the vehicle. Can you actually record or broadcast a video on a wireless telecommunications device or a standalone electronic device?
Well, I think it would depend. So first of all, if you're lawfully parked or stopped, that's an exception to the bill. So if you were stopped, I think you would be able to do that. And if you can, it says that it does not prohibit reporting an accident. So in other words, if you were just simply reporting it, that would be another exception to it. And then finally, of course, it wouldn't impact first responders or commercial radio. So think specific exception for ham radio and commercial radio. So I think to the extent that the truck drivers use commercial radios and things like that. So if it's within one of those exceptions, I would say it's allowed. But if you have to hold your phone to record something, I would say that that's not allowed under this law while you're driving, while the car's moving. Although that'd be really hard to do anyway.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And State Representative, how does the GPS work on an app like Google Maps while driving?
Same thing. So you can tell your Apple CarPlay or your Bluetooth, navigate, again, with a one-touch voice control, navigate to X location. But obviously the better course of action, so you don't have to argue with a police officer whether or not it was one-touch initiation, would be to enter the address of where you're going before you start driving while you're still parked, and then set it away and forget about it.
And I hate to ask this question too, but if the phone is actually, say, mounted, is it okay for the GPS to be displayed on a screen?
Yes, it is okay for it to be displayed, like you said, if it's mounted or if it connects to your car's screen. It's okay as long as you're not watching a video, movie, game, or video call.
Yes, ma'am. And for of course, as you know, for the first 180 days of the law, only warnings can be given out for the hands-free violation by law enforcement. Fines and points can be added to the driver's license after a 180-day grace period. So what happens thereafter?
Right. So then after 180 days, you can start getting a ticket for this. The first offense is a fine of only $100. But if you get a second offense within 3 years, the fine goes up to $200. And more importantly, for most drivers, it's a 2-point ticket against or 2 points against your license. And so, as you know, those points can add up. And eventually, if you get enough points, that can affect your license. So if you had this plus a reckless driving or something like that, those points do start to add up. So second or subsequent offense within 3 years is a 2-point violation.
Wow. And as you know, too, I've seen some of the signs around, but signs will be placed at every interstate highway in South Carolina to advise drivers about the new law. But I have to go a little step further, State Representative. Why not a more aggressive driving law and an aggressive driving unit / campaign?
Well, I think, again, this is just one of an all of the above solution, right? We have to have the law in place in order for law enforcement to take any sort of aggressive campaign against it. But it was really important to us to make sure that the public had ample time to be educated about the law. So in other words, that's why 180 days was important. We felt like that was enough time for the average, for news journalists such as yourself to pick up on the story, for word to get around on social media. And that's why we specify that there'll be warnings before that. But then I know from talking with Charleston County, City of Charleston, they are already they are ramped up on enforcement and traffic enforcement. So they'll be adding this to their routine, patrols, looking for speed, looking for drivers on their phones. And I think it's going to be something that we actually do see a lot of aggressive enforcement of. Our law enforcement officers are I think, unfortunately, have seen so many issues with this that they're ready to enforce this as an important safety measure.
How exactly will they enforce it? Like jumping on the bus and seeing people on the phones in their cars?
No. Again, I think it's got to be, a couple things. So one, they have to have clear and unobstructed view of a driver on their phone. I think important thing for people to know their rights if they do get pulled over. The law enforcement officer does not have a right to search your phone if this is the only offense. A law enforcement officer does not have a right to search your car based on being pulled over for this offense. And you cannot be arrested for just this offense. Now, let's say you get pulled over and immediately the car smells like marijuana, right? That's a whole different level of reasonable suspicion now for the officer in terms of search, in terms of custodial arrest. But just for this offense, they cannot search your phone, they cannot search your car, and they cannot take you to jail just for this arrest. It can be just a ticket. If there's no other offense, that comes open, or you weren't speeding, or there's not, you have your driver's license is valid, and all of the other things that are there. If it's just this offense, you do have those rights.
What about speeding? What are you all in Columbia going to do about that next?
Hey, listen. Well, I think right now we have, the posted speed limit is the posted speed limit. For the most part, in my opinion, we've done a reasonable job of setting speed limits, of setting maximum speed limits, of allowing neighborhoods to set their speed limits. And so from my perspective, it's really an enforcement thing at this point. So every year we continue to add money to law enforcement budgets to allow for more state trooper patrols. We continue to make sure that we're giving back the local government fund money to make sure that local governments have the money to hire enough law enforcement officers. But for the most part, speed patrolling and enforcement are really a function of law enforcement more so than the legislature.
And I know you've talked to Charleston County and also the City of Charleston Police Department. How many more officers will it add to, say, for lack of a better word, this beat?
Well, I think right now the plan is to make sure that all their guys and gals that are on the traffic patrols are just adding this to their regular patrol, right? So they're just looking for this in addition to speeding, seatbelt violations, other violations that they see. I think it remains to be seen whether or not they're going to add any particular officers or enhance enforcement. Right now we've been asking them to focus on schools and asking them to focus on bus stops and asking them to focus on speeding in neighborhoods. And so certainly I think this will be a priority, especially during this rollout phase. But I don't know, that'll be an individual law enforcement agency decision as to whether they add extra patrol officers or simply use existing resources to just look out for this violation as well.
And you talk about those existing resources, and of course, this is just a rollout phase, as you just mentioned a second ago. Was money put in the budget prior to this being passed?
No. So this was not indicated as a bill that we were going to give any additional money for. This is simply now one of the violations that existing law enforcement patrols can be looking out for.
Okay, perfect. Well, State Representative Attorney Spencer Wetmore, thank you for your time, and again, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thanks again for having me. You always ask the tough questions.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great one. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.